I'm really excited to talk to our guest tonight. She's an author of, we'll talk about this new book. But I was listening to her on a podcast with our friend Nina Turner, and I have some notes and things that she said. But Jennifer Farmer is somebody who has been involved in politics for a very, very long time in the in a public relations capacity. And so I don't know her. I'm looking forward to meeting her. So can we do that?
Yes, we absolutely can.
You're in control of this.
Well,
You've got the mouse.
I'm trying to write the entire banner
but just
through.
you do. Well, first of all, stop that.
Yes. Remove.
No, that.
Okay.
And now do that.
Bingo.
Hi.
Hi. Thanks.
How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you all?
We're good. I'm glad to see you because I listened to your the podcast that you did with Nina, but of course it's audio only. And so and for me, there is something really about like expression and stuff like that. So I kind of feel like I was trying to picture the two of you sitting there and talking, but this is so much better to be able to see you. So would you just introduce yourself and say what your background is? I know that you worked with Nina years ago, and then you would even realize that you were there 10 years prior to her being there, I believe in Ohio, correct?
Not exactly. So I met Senator Turner when she was a state senator. And when she was a state senator, I was the deputy chief of staff for the Senate Democrats in Ohio. So that's how she and I initially met. And, we've been friends, and she's been an occasional client since then, but certainly someone who I hold in the highest of esteem.
So do we.
Someone who I know. And, we both love her. Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And, obviously this book is not something that it's hard for me because I feel like I only want to be kind and respectful and just. Like, that's all I want to do. And sometimes I don't know, and I don't want to overstep and stuff, but this is a guide about I want to say that everything that happens in terms of oppression or injustice is something that's exponentially in the Black community. And then when you add to it Black women, it's like a whole other exponential level of just having to deal with grief and aggravation. So as just a woman, I've had to deal with, we all have. But then I know how much worse it has been for Black women. And I am just not in such the best position to talk about that. And that is one of the main things that I'm so thankful that you will come on and talk about that. So explain why you were inspired about this book, like based on your history and your world what you've seen.
So, great question. I wrote this book after reading countless leadership books and realizing that in all the advice they gave to women about how to make it, and all the advice they gave to ambitious people, there was a glaring omission in terms of what I would face as a Black woman walking into different professional spaces and then just navigating life. So there was a time in my life where I thought, if you just study hard, if you show up in these professional spaces and you work hard, if you're really, really smart, that was all you needed to do. What I did not appreciate is that as a Black woman, it doesn't matter how many books you've written. It doesn't matter how many degrees you have. It doesn't matter the professional experience. When you walk into a new situation, you must always be prepared to prove yourself. And certainly sometimes we think, okay, well, I've done all of this. As soon as people read my resume and they hear about my credentials, that will be enough. And, as someone who has worked in politics and public relations, I have been in situations where, join a diverse team, a large team, and people want to explain to me how PR works. And I had to tell someone recently, listen, I've been doing PR for 20 years, and I wrote a book about PR. I've lectured on PR. I know how it works. And whenever I experience those types of things, I always wonder how much is race and how much is gender. And the truth is there's a combination of both. So that is what brought me to deciding you know what? We need leadership books that are written from the lens of gender and race and speak to the very things that Black women will experience in professional settings and in life.
I think that's so spot on. I think it's really important. And I also think it's important for young people. And you spoke a lot about how important it was with your, I don't want this to be like creepy, like I was stalking you and telling you what you said, but it was just, I made some notes, but just talking about how important this was for you with your daughter and your nieces and being a role model and setting this, path, especially for Black women that just wasn't there when you were that age.
Yeah. And, you know, Jen, it's very interesting that you say that, because I think as mothers, I thought, and as, you know, women who will be mothers, if you choose that route, I always thought, well, you teach your kids, you tell your kids, but kids learn a lot based on what they see you doing, and based on, there's a lot more that's caught than taught, I should say. And so what I realized is that as I worked to deconstruct harmful patterns in my life, even if I am not vocalizing that to my daughter, she will see it, she will embrace it, and there will be certain things that she may not have to encounter. So for instance, one thing, if you listen to the interview, I'm sure you heard this part, but I don't talk about weight. You know, I don't care if I've gained 50 pounds. I don't care if I've lost 50 pounds. I don't talk about weight. I don't talk about my body in a negative way. I don't look in the mirror and say, oh my God, girl, look at that love handle or whatever. I don't say that, because my daughter is paying attention and I want her to have a love of her body, however she presents and however she appears.
Yeah. And then, you know, there is this added factor for Black women, and it can be things as specific as your hair. It could be how you dress, or whatever ethno-cultural things that somebody wants to display of themselves is treated differently when it's perceived as Black. And this is this added thing that white women don't deal with. The harassment, yes, like there is definitely, like you said, it's an intersection of race and gender. But you're dealing with so much more. Do you want me to, can you move your microphone closer?
Sure. Is that better? Or
is that better, John? Yeah.
Our producer will let us know.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think it's so important. And so basically you found a hole a void of information in a particular area. And it just so happenstance is an area that you are a specialist in. So it makes sense to write a book. But talk about like where you see the crossover from work and personal, and really because we think about harassment much more in our workplace. Like we think of it work related, but we don't necessarily think of it in just general. And I think that is also something that as a Black woman you have had to deal with in a very different way. There's that angry Black woman stereotype that we've been hearing about. And I have met some angry Black people. I've met some very angry lots of people, but it's just this ridiculous narrative that we're fed. And I think that you always have to be conscious of that as well.
Yeah. And I mean, the thing is, anger is a legitimate emotion. It just is, like every other emotion. There's no emotion that's good. There's no emotion that's bad. Anger is a legitimate emotion. But most Black women from the time that we were little girls have been counseled about how we show our displeasure. And the world is not comfortable hearing from Black women when we don't like something or when we want something to change. And so there's always a calculation of, how do I say this? How do I put it in writing? Do I need to put it in writing? Do I need to bring someone with me? Do I need to add a smiley face if I send an email? If something traumatic happens, how do I talk about it in a very, very level tone so that I don't make other people angry or afraid? And the other thing is that, our society is not really is not really equipped or trained to see Black women in the range of our emotions. And that is either, angry, really sad, or what have you. And so when you express vulnerability, when you showcase how you feel, someone is always going to be upset. And I think a lot about, and I talk about this in the book, is the construct of niceness. And there's this construct of niceness where you must make other people comfortable. You must prioritize their needs, even if it's at your expense. You must be super nice and you must be kind. Well, sometimes the kind thing to do is to be clear and to tell you, this is a boundary and I don't want you to cross it. And then when you've crossed it, you've crossed this boundary and that's not appropriate. So that's one thing. The other thing is sometimes we mistake depression or sadness for anger. And sometimes depression and sadness can present as anger when it's really someone who's really going through a difficult time and maybe they need supports for which they haven't accessed. So the angry Black woman trope, it is serious, it's damaging. It can lead you Black women to suppressing how they feel. And we know that if we don't show emotion, if we suppress it, we become numb. That's not good. But then there are also physical manifestations in the body. And so one thing that I'm saying in the book is that we really have to deconstruct how we think about anger, particularly as it relates to Black women. And if you're someone who said, oh, well, because she told me how she felt, I'm intimidated by her, or she makes me uncomfortable, that is your job to sit with and to handle. That's not my job. But so often we want to put it back on the Black woman for expressing how she feels. And really, that's what we teach our kids to do, is if something bothers you, communicate about it.
Yeah.
We're speaking with Jennifer Farmer, author of First and Only, A Black Woman's Guide to Thriving at Work and in Life. Speaking of our good friend, Nina Turner, there was an incident that took place during Bernie's run for president that I still think stands out as an example of, I don't know how she kept it together under the circumstance, but Hillary Rosen, who is the head of SDK Knickerbocker, who is one of the biggest political hacks in all of DC politics, when she made her comment to Nina on national...
You know what we're talking about.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Oh, I'm sure you do.
She made her comment on national television saying that you, Nina Turner, cannot speak for Martin Luther King.
No, she said, you don't have standing. To quote Dr. King. She said that all the hairs on the back of my neck stood up, and I was like, oh.
And I saw it live. I saw it live when it happened, and I just thought... Listen, Nina.
Ridiculous.
Nina's got a fire inside of her that I don't think people really understand, and how she held it in that moment.
But I'm gonna push back on that, on the fire inside of her, because I feel like that I don't feel like we have really allowed her to showcase all of who she is.
Nope.
It is convenient, and there are some people who like to see that fire inside of her, but she's a full human being who has vulnerability. And one of the critiques that I have based on how she has been presented is you only see that fire. And she is such a warm and a caring person. I don't know if you all have had the opportunity to watch her really, really engage with voters, but there's a genuine curiosity, there's a genuine warmth, and I wish that we showcase more of that instead of just the fire inside of her. But I know exactly what situation you all are referring to. I watched that interview and I was aghast. But here's the thing. Had she lost it in that moment, that would have been
all they would have talked about.
They were baiting her. That's what I feel like. I feel like their people are constantly baiting that, because that, first of all, if it bleeds, it leads.
Right.
And there is a certain amount of drama. Just the mere fact that, like, you brought this up, I didn't know you were going to bring that up, like, because it's this like sort of drama thing.
Because I don't think
it was a terrible moment.
Yeah.
It speaks to what we experience. And here's the thing. We were fortunate that we saw that on TV, that kind of thing happens all the time in workplaces across the country. It's a beautiful example because I mean, it was just, it was flabbergasting.
And she did it in such a brazen, flippant way. Like, she didn't even think twice about it.
It was just shocking. It was shocking.
The thing about that really upset me is, one, it was totally brazen, and when she said it, she had her chest out when she said it, Yeah. But then when people online took her to task for that, She said, well, I've reached out to her and I'm waiting for her to call me back. And here's what I know about apologies and seeking forgiveness. When you want to apologize to someone, you don't need to put it on Twitter, or you don't need to say I've texted her or whatever. You wait until you've spoken with them. You ask them if it's okay. And I just felt like it was terrible. I felt like how she handled it poorly. And I felt like it was a classic display of what Black women experience in professional settings.
I wanted to jump through and grab her by her hair. I really did. Like I say this on the regular, and I'm noticing it more and more. And now I'm getting to the point where these women are my peers, right? Like I'm pushing 50, right? So like this is my peer group. So we all grew up in the 70s, late 60s, right? Like we're in this group of people. These are women that needed an ass kicking. And I see it left and right. And I really want to say, like, where these women grew up, their childhood peers did them a disservice by not doing so. And I keep noticing this, like that woman, it's visceral. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I just felt like infuriated about that.
The reason I wanted to bring that up is because one of the things that I've noticed in the years that I've gotten into politics, especially last few years, is the way that the Black community, especially Black women, are patronized in a way that, you know, there's still what I perceive to be this sort of patting on the head thing, and always complimenting and saying how important the Black vote, especially the Black women vote, is to the Democratic Party, let's say. And then as soon as they ascertain power, they go right back down to the bottom. Yeah, we'll get to you maybe at some point, but, you know, we got priorities. And so I'm curious as to what that experience has been like for you personally as you've observed it, because again, I'm a white man, but I'm not blind. And I just want to make sure that people fully understand what it's like to have to go through that. And you go through it every couple of years. And I don't know how anybody deals with it anymore.
Well, I think what happens is you become a little bit skeptical. Not a little bit, you become a lot skeptical. And it's a turnoff, and it leads to disengagement, you know. And I think it happens so frequently. Every election cycle it happens, and it's discouraging. And then you get to the point where you're like, okay, this is what I expect. And that's why when I see people who take political stances, and it may appear radical to some, it doesn't bother me, because if you know, as Frederick Douglass said, power concedes nothing without a demand. Yeah. There must be a demand, and you can't go and ask for it nicely. You know, you have to take it. And I think that we're in this situation where a lot of people feel that there's no authenticity. I think it's what draws people to someone like Nina Turner, because they feel like she is authentic and that she deeply cares and she will fight for them. But you're absolutely right. I feel like we see this election cycle after election cycle. And what's disturbing for me is there are a group of people who, even though we know this, who will still try to beat Black people over the head if they do not vote the way that they want them to do. They want them to vote.
Yeah.
And this reached a fever pitch this past election cycle. And it was just, it was sad.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, but, you know, and as people that have recently been through a campaign, its demographics are seen in a monolithic way in so many different areas, but specifically in the Black community, you're definitely treated like there's this monolith, like, oh, all Black people should vote this way because, is anybody doing anything for a Black agenda on that? Is there reparations in your platform? Like what are you bringing to the party, figuratively, literally, and it's not much. And all of the things that would best suit really everybody in this country would exponentially help Black women. Things like single payer healthcare and childcare and public college and a minimum wage and, you know, all of these things. I mean, that is, as far as like the poverty and vulnerable, that it helps the people that are most vulnerable the most. And yet the Democrats are selling themselves, oh yeah, of course we're the party for the Black agenda. In what way?
And Jen and I were just talking before you came on the air about who were the Democrats negotiating with. They were negotiating against themselves, or specifically against their corporate donors, because they passed the bill without a single GOP vote. So you kind of have to wonder, well, what exactly are you holding back on?
Yeah.
That to me, I think speaks volumes. And I think a lot of people are starting to catch on to that. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think that we always need a group of people who are going to keep pushing the line. You can never become content just because your quote unquote party is in office. You still have to push the line. And one of the beautiful things that we saw last summer, of course, it was born out of tragedy and unspeakable horror, but we saw a protest movement, not just in the United States, but across the world, like what we haven't seen. I don't know if we've ever seen people take to the streets as we saw last summer. And that energy and that fire, and that demand, we have to be willing to level it even towards people who we consider our friends, And so I think that when people voted this past election cycle, the nation was very clear that the nation was in trouble and that people want change. And we have to be able to ask even our friends. We have to be able to hold them accountable as well. We can't go quiet just because our quote unquote party is in office. We have to be willing to hold whoever accountable. And the agenda has to be more important than the personality.
All right. And I wanted to just go back for a second because I'd written something down, and it's something that as a white person that I'm cognizant of, but don't really, it's hard to really understand it great, is the difference between like racism and colorism and what you deal with within the Black community, especially as darker skinned women have dealt with in the Black community, and what that's like, because I don't think that a lot of people that are white really understand what that's about, because to them it's all racism. So how can you be racist if you're Black? If you're Black, you can't be racist. I don't think people understand what that really looks like.
Okay, so I don't believe that Black people can be racist. Racism is about power. And so it's about power. And collectively, Black people have experienced a loss of power. So I don't believe that Black people can be racist. When it comes to colorism, and when it comes to anti-Blackness, I think America is anti-Black by default. I think that even people who are interested in being anti-racist, they still have to do anti-racism their entire life. You don't get to the point where just because you have good feelings or just because you have a few Black friends or you've taken a few diversity courses where you can opt out. If you live in this country, as long as you are breathing, you are doing anti-racism work. And the thing is, because we all live in this world that is anti-Black by default, all of us must be thinking about how we hold each other, and that includes Black people. And so the standard for many people is to be as close to white as possible, or the desire is to be as close to white as possible. And so if you can't, if you're not white, well, how light are you? And, years ago, there was a brown paper bag test. And if you were lighter than that brown paper bag, then you had a different set of opportunities. If you were darker than that paper bag, then, you missed out on a lot of opportunities. Colorism is extremely painful. And I have seen the pain on both sides, but it's extremely painful because you don't get to pick your skin color, right? Both of my parents are darker than me, but I still turned out this way. But you don't get to pick. And with Black people, there's been so much rape in our bloodline that you really don't know how your kids are going to come out, But in the Black community, there are many people who have adopted the same standards as the dominant society or the mainstream or the white society, meaning in terms of how beauty is defined. And so I think that colorism is very, very dangerous. It's very, very painful. And here's what I mean. If you look at pop culture, when this interview is over, if not tonight, tomorrow, go look at Black films. Look at the husband and look at the wife. The wife is almost
always lighter.
Almost always light.
Always.
And look at their kids. They're going to have a daughter who's light skinned and they're going to have a son who's dark, right? And then look at women who are my complexion and darker. and TV series, they're most likely they're not going to be married. There was I wish I could remember the brand, but there was a brand that just launched a new product, and it was something about love. And everybody in their commercial was coupled except for the Black woman. There was a Black woman and she was single, right? But when you are constantly told, or when you constantly see that light is preferred, that is very, very hurtful. And so there are people who have been deeply, deeply traumatized. Now, by the same token, I have people in my family who are biracial. I have people in my family who are very, very fair, and they have received a ton of pain because they feel like, well, where am I accepted? You know, I'm not accepted by white people. I'm not accepted by Black people. I didn't choose my skin color. I wrote an article on colorism for medium.com, and I wrote it last year. And what I said was that Black America still has a problem with dark-skinned Black women. And I stand by that. And if I could write that article over, the only thing that I would add is that there's a pain associated with being light too, because people want to exoticize you. People want to hold you accountable for things that you have no control. So that is a hot button topic. And Jen, I'll tell you something. I have not talked to a single Black woman who's dark skinned who cannot recount a painful experience based on their color.
Yeah, that doesn't, you know what, I'm not surprised. I don't know an adult woman that hasn't been violated as a woman. So why would there be a dark skinned Black woman that hasn't been somehow vilified for being darker skinned? I mean, you know, it's sad to me. The whole thing is sad to me.
It's not just vilified. It's what society presents as desirable.
As beautiful. And
so I have a rule in my house. If you want to give my daughter a gift, that's fine. But you better make sure that gift, if it's a baby doll, and I don't want too many of those, that it looks like her skin color, because I want her to see the beauty in the skin that she's in. She can't control that skin.
Yeah, it's interesting to me because when I was in college, I used to collect Cosmopolitan covers because there was this period of time when the art director who did them, they were really artsy and cool. And I used to collect them all, whatever. And I remember at one point there was a model on there who was really, really dark. And I just could not get over how beautiful she was. Like I thought she looked like she came from like the heavens or something. Like I thought she was just beautiful. And so, you know, I get that. And just somehow that it never was something that I thought, and it bothers me that there's not more people that get this. And so what kind of stuff can we do to promote that so that there are more things that are, you know, inclusive for people, because I just think it's all about the more we see that as normal, the more we see that as beautiful, the more whatever the thing is. I just think that's what we need.
So I think that we need to all do our own anti-racism work. And we also need to really focus on anti-Blackness and what it looks like. I think producers and writers and directors and people who are in charge of casting, they have to do a better job of presenting the full range of Black people. They can't just stick with this light-skinned version, because it's not fair to that person and it's not fair to the rest of us. I think
it's not real. That's not real. Those are there's real people are varied.
Yeah, it's one piece. But I think that the more that we see diversity of hue in popular culture, in the media, I mean, you can even look at media at media outlets and who are their anchors. If they have a Black anchor, who are they? You know, and so the more that we can do to put different types of Black women on TV, in popular culture, on sitcoms, or what have you, the better.
Yeah. And I also think that racism, it can be very subtle in a way that people don't see it or don't recognize it when it happens. When Andrew Gillum ran for governor, I can remember when they did a debate. And they purposely hued his skin color as dark as possible on TV.
They did.
I said, I know what they're doing. I've seen this before. I am going to make the white suburbanite whatever, housewife, whatever you want to say. I'm going to make them uncomfortable.
Make them yeah. Well,
that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
And by doing that, it becomes a subliminal reaction, as it is to a lot of things. The media has a lot of tricks, as you know, and they've been doing this forever. And if they think it's bad now, go back and look at some movies that were made even in the 80s and the way that Black people were depicted in film.
Okay, I grew up then. It's not that long ago, but yes, saying. Okay. Thank you.
I'm from the 80s.
Yeah,
but I'm
from the 80s.
All right, I'm 30s. I'll be 38 soon. So, of course, I'm supposed to be, totally removed from what it was really like when it was really bad. But the truth is, it's still bad. It's just done in subtle ways that I don't, again, if people are not waving the Confederate flag or letting the N-word fly or things like that, they think, well, it's okay. Everything's better now. No, it's actually not. They've gotten smarter about it and a lot more subtle about it. And that's why people don't necessarily notice it. And so that's always been, that's been my perspective. It's like, when I see it, I don't ignore it. Some people brush it off like it's not a big deal. I'm like, no, it's a big deal.
It's a big deal.
Because I don't think you understand how subliminal messaging actually works on people. And I do think that when it comes to systemic racism, that in itself is one of the biggest hurdles that we still need to clear. Obama was the proper amount of dark that white suburbia was comfortable with, versus somebody like Andrew Gillum, who is a Black man and is actually from a working class, rough, upbringing. There are people who simply are not accepting of that. And you see it all the time. And I do think, and I think this is a good segue to what I think is a very important topic, especially as it relates to where we're going in terms of how we have a progressive future. I don't think, Jennifer, people truly understand how powerful corporate media is and how they can push a narrative to get what they want. And if that means convincing people of basically accepting crumbs is the only thing you're deserving of in this society, it's amazing how many people will actually buy that and think, well, I guess it's all I'm worth, and that's that. So if you could talk about your perspective as a Black woman when it comes to corporate media and how they do control the narrative, how do you see that?
Well, I think that it's extremely important to invest in Black media, to invest in independent media. Extremely, extremely important. And I also think that, generally, broadly speaking, the media has been contracting for years. The number of jobs lost in journalism in 2020, I think it was the most like in perhaps the last 5 years. And every year the job loss is staggering. And so if you go back to, I'm going to talk about this from the lens of race, but if you go back to the Kerner Commission report, so after the race riots in 1967, the Kerner Commission was put together, and they were charged with understanding the root causes of the riots. And one of the things they found when they released their report in 1968 was that the media did not fairly characterize or present Black people. The media did not include sufficient Black people, right? And so sometimes I think about that Kerner Commission report and those findings over 5 decades ago, right? And where we are today. And the media, there's still some representation on screen. There's not enough representation on screen, and there's certainly not enough behind. And so whenever you have that, how people are presented is going to be distorted, because when you silence a group of people and then you call yourself presenting the news, you're going to present a slanted version of the news. And remember what I said earlier about, I think that this nation is racist by default and anti-Black by default. And so when you have people who could care less, that is going to influence how the media covers different topics. So that's that. But then, the media is very, very powerful. It's very, very powerful. And so sometimes we consume so much media that sometimes we'll begin thinking things and you'll wonder, well, where did this come from? Well, it has to do with the amount of media and pop culture that you have consumed. And the way that the media, large corporations are buying up these small outlets. It used to be that you could go to a website and you could see who owned a media company. And now you have like these large companies that are buying up all of them. And it just, all
roads lead to a small group of white men.
It presents a challenge. Yeah, it just presents a challenge.
That's really what it is. You could follow everybody now, and all roads lead to a handful of white men at the top that are controlling all of this, and they're controlling the narrative to better suit themselves. And I just think I can see it in my head.
If we're fighting amongst ourselves and not fighting the ones who are actually making these decisions, then we're going to continue to circle the drain. And it just seems to get worse and worse and worse every day.
Well, the other thing is that, the media has a financial incentive, right?
Oh, yes.
So they benefit by showcasing certain things. And if it impacts their bottom line, then, that's going to be very hard for some people to turn away from in a capitalistic society.
Yeah. So this is what I was just thinking about, because I was looking in the mirror. I did a magic wand for you because I had that term black girl magic in my head. And so I did a magic wand for you. But I really dig that phrase. I think it's really cool, and I really get it. And I have been very fortunate over the past couple of years to be able to form some very good relationships and closer friendships with Black people. And I hadn't had that before. I really hadn't had that before. And there is definitely something about Black girl magic. I've seen it. I don't know exactly what is that? What is that? It's a power. I think Black women are amazing. I think that, I meet so many Black women who are just brilliant, whether or not they have 5 degrees or not, they're just brilliant. I think about the Black women in my family, and a lot of what I know about mothering, a lot of what I know about being a woman of integrity, it comes from the examples around me. And we live in a world where Black women are often undermined. And people say, oh, yeah, well, we should listen to Black women until we get into the boardroom, and then we silence them. Or, okay, no, Jennifer, we don't want to do that. Okay, you've made your point. Gosh, she's so angry. And so I think as a way to celebrate our beauty, to celebrate our strength, to celebrate our ingenuity, we think about Black girl magic, and we think about the things that we do. And I don't want to say it's effortless, because it takes work, and a lot of people would be surprised. And I think it's a way of affirming us. It's a way of loving us. It's a way of celebrating us in a world that is reluctant to do that, in a world that is reluctant to see our beauty in all its shapes and all its forms. And so I like the phrase. And I also think that we should be careful that we include that we don't require Black women to jump through all these hoops in order to be considered magic. You don't have to write a book to be considered magic. I think that we have to be careful, and that's what I tell myself, to just see the beauty and the wisdom in directly impacted people, in ordinary Black women who are doing their best to survive in a nation and in many workplaces that are not set up for our success. Yeah, and I say it all the time. If you want something handled, you let a woman handle it. If you really need something handled, you give it to a Black woman, because that is going to get done. I don't know if it's because things are exponentially harder, because there's this history that is this very this group hurt that is there, that just, I don't know what it is, but I'm always blown away. Always. I just surrounded by extremely amazingly powerful Black women. And it's been really cool past couple of years. That's what I think.
How much of the change can be brought forth through an economic agenda? I think a lot of people hesitate, and there's either a fear of some kind when they hear racial justice, if you will. When I think of reparations, I think it's very simple. I think it's bank investment in communities of color that desperately need help. Getting those bank loans, getting those economic opportunities. That's what real reparations are. People have this idea in their head. It's just, give me cash and that'll do it. No, it's not. It's an old adage of, you give a man a fish, he'll eat for a day. You teach a man to fish, he'll eat for the rest of his life. And it's this sort of idea that an economic agenda can really change the way racial justice is done in this country. Do you agree with that? And are there some ideas that you have as far as how we should look to do that going forward?
I think the topic of reparations, it's a topic that should only be discussed and decided by Black people who were directly impacted by. So I don't think it's appropriate for a non-Black person to say, this is what I think it should be. Black people need to decide that. And on the topic of economics and racial justice, both are important. And I also don't want to lose sight that when Dr. King died, he was fighting for economic justice. I think that, a lot of the problems in our society stem from people not being able to take care of themselves. When I think about high crime rates in different communities, that's not necessarily because people are indigent, because they're prone to violence. A lot of it is because they don't have a job that allows them to live a life with dignity. They don't have hope for the future. And so when I think about the role that economics can play, reparations absolutely comes there. And I think it might be cash payments. It could be other things, but it might be cash payments. I also think, student loan debt forgiveness, it has to be a part of the equation because Black people collectively I read an article by Tanisha Peoples. She's an education activist with an organization called Brightbeam. And she said that education was like the new poverty pimp. And when you think about Black people and student loans, it bears a horrible toll. So I think student loans have to be a part of it. For years, Black people were locked out of opportunities for home ownership. And then when they got to own a home, when they were able to own a home, the interest rates were so high, or they had balloon payments, or they had other things inside those packages that made the transfer of their homes to future generations unlikely and impossible. There must be redress for that. Healthcare is another way. It's one of the leading ways that people go bankrupt. That has to be addressed. So I think it's a lot. I think that economics is crucially important, and I think that racial justice is important. I also feel if we're unwilling to deal with racial injustice in this country, we probably aren't going to deal with the economic things that need to happen in order to really give people a shot at living, not just in their generation, but in future generations. What I think about in terms of the Black community is you see some people who make it against the odds, and they've been able to save a little bit of money. Maybe they have a good income. And the pressure on that person to provide for so many people and their families, it can be overwhelming. And so if we really want to set Black people up for success, yes, we have to consider reparations. We have to look at student loan forgiveness. We have to look at healthcare. We also have to look at felony disenfranchisement laws because those are disproportionately, all that stuff was designed not with public safety in mind, but as a way to suppress Black people. And that has to be reversed.
Yeah, criminal justice is a huge thing for me. And I've been talking about this for a long time. The fact that we have a profit motive for incarceration and for policing is just absolutely outrageous. Yep. And it's obviously going to disproportionately affect our most vulnerable people. And at this point, to me, I just look at it, it's just slave labor. That's just slave labor. And not only do they get slave labor, but then they actually profit off of the incarceration and they profit off of people once they're even on probation. It's just this giant predatory money racket designed to suppress Black people and profit simultaneously. That's how I think of it.
And there's another area where Black women are disproportionately impacted. There was a time when Black men were being incarcerated at alarming rates, and they still are. But now that mass incarceration engine, it is hungry for Black bodies. And so women are being incarcerated. But even when women are not being incarcerated at the same rates as Black men, they're still bearing the brunt of putting money on the books. And of course, like you said, there's a profit incentive for the companies that are allowed to run commissary, to run the phone programs. And Black women are carrying that burden as well. So when I think about the health disparities that impact Black women, racism is a direct contributor to those disparities. It's not just about what you eat or what you consume, but it's the toll of being Black in America.
Yeah, I can see that. And there's psychological impacts that affect health. And then there's also genetic impacts that affect health. And I think it's really important for people to understand that there is a distinction, and it is very critical to have Black representation in healthcare and Black voices in healthcare, because the approach, I'm in the middle of reading Medical Apartheid. And I've reached out to her a few times. I'd love to interview her, but this history, this like collective trauma history between the Black community and Western medicine is a huge thing, and I don't think it's as simple as just give everyone health care. I think that's the start. I mean, that's definitely financially the thing, but there needs to be more of a race connection with healthcare in Black communities. It's just something that is lacking.
Well, there's a lot of work that there's absolutely racism in the medical industry, and medical apartheid really opened my eyes. And
it's freaking me out. Freaking me out.
We also see it with COVID. I mean, Dr. Susan Moore was the doctor in Indiana, the Black woman doctor in Indiana, and even being a doctor was not enough to save her life. They treated this woman despicably. And so there's a ton of racism. There's a ton of racism in the medical industry. When you couple that with what's in our genes based on what our ancestors have experienced, and then you couple that with the inability to receive quality care based on our skin color, based on our gender, it's really disappointing. And all of this is enough to make a person just say, well, what is the use? On every corner, I'm besieged. And so when people have the audacity and the courage and the willingness to just keep trying, when Black people have the audacity to just keep trying, I applaud them for that, because the challenges are great.
Yeah, I think so too.
We're speaking, of course, with Jennifer Farmar, author of First and Only, A Black Woman's Guide to Thriving at Work and in Life. We do want to obviously wrap things up, but I want to have you have the opportunity to share with the audience what are the most important things to take away from your book and why they should read it.
So, great question. The most important thing to take away from the book is that, one, I wrote the book with Black women in mind, but if you are someone who works with Black women who want to understand what Black women experience.
I downloaded yesterday.
Yeah, the book is something that you need to read. And what's been interesting to me about this process is when I wrote the book, I saw Black women. But the feedback that I'm getting from women who are Southeast Asian and just women in general about how it has opened their eyes, that has been surprising. And it's also been enlightening, or not enlightening, but it's been encouraging that even though it was written with Black women in mind, this book has something for everyone. And if you read the book and it does nothing more than show you how or support you as you work to become a better ally, then that's phenomenal, and the people in your circle, the people in your life will thank you for it. I think the other thing that I would leave is for us to really think about how we hold anger and how we think about anger when it shows up on different people, when it shows up on Black women, when it shows up on Black kids, like to really sit with, if we are experiencing discomfort, why is that? And would we feel the same way if the person was a different gender or a different race? I think that is a critical takeaway. And the final thing that I would say is First and Only is available at any bookseller.
I Kindled. I don't always Kindle. I prefer to paper, but I was kind of like feeling lazy. And so I Kindled. Yeah.
Yeah, so anywhere books are sold, you can get it on Kindle. And I'm asking people, when you read the book, leave a review. It doesn't matter if you like everything in it. Leave a review and share your feedback. I want to hear your feedback.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. That's next in line. I'm having a theme that's been continuing since Black History Month, because I'm not like the fastest of readers. And so, yeah, I'm just in it.
We're very grateful that you came on tonight, Jennifer. Obviously, it is a very important topic that doesn't get talked about enough. And if it makes you uncomfortable, then you probably should be talking a lot more about it than you normally do.
And it isn't always comfortable and it isn't always easy, but I feel like I'm very appreciative. And that I used this quote before you even came on, where every day that we live has to be an act of resistance. Yeah. And I feel that, like, I understand that. And it's every day I feel like, okay, I'm sort of understanding a little bit more and a little bit more. And I'm very appreciative that you came on and you would talk about this, and I'm looking forward to reading it. And I will definitely send a comment. I will post a comment.
And one last thing I will mention, which I do think is very relevant to this topic, believe it or not, what the progressives just did in the state of Nevada by taking over the Democratic State Party, by eliminating people on their board that have the corporate donors' interests in mind first and foremost, and not the needs of the working class. I do think that is the type of thing that will set in motion the type of changes that this country needs, especially from a racial justice standpoint. Because if you're not motivated by corporate special interests and you're motivated by equality and justice, then that is what is going to happen in a lot of other parts of the country. Hopefully in Florida, hopefully in Ohio.
I'm not holding my breath.
Well, we got to try.
Well, yeah. Or like I said, maybe, see somebody like Nina wins and then we just move to Ohio.
Well,
I have to hedge my bets. If Lee Carter wins in Virginia, that becomes a good place to go. But I don't know. Florida's going into the ocean fast.
Jennifer, it's very difficult to talk up Florida. Unfortunately, we have we certainly earn our reputation. At least Ohio has a real. It's a very unique state. It's so much.
Yeah.
It's so much of everything. And obviously, you're in the true working class, part of the state in Northeast Ohio. And so, we obviously are very grateful.
Ohio.
You're Central Ohio.
What, Cincinnati?
Columbus.
Okay.
I was there for a concert. You have that really nice outdoor venue there.
Yes.
You know what I'm talking about? It's really nice. I mean, well, we don't have that here like that.
No, but I'm guessing, are you a Buckeyes fan? Do I have to?
I'm from Columbus, so I have to cheer for the Buckeyes.
Yeah.
But I actually went to school in New York, University of Rochester.
Ah, okay. Very cool.
I went and visited there a couple times last year. My son was looking at Eastman School of Music, and that was my first time there. But then I got to go there again. I actually kind of dig Rochester, and that is where the Susan B. Anthony house is, and the cool little sculpture with her and Frederick Douglass having like tea at the park. And have you seen this?
I have.
It's really cool.
I spent a lot of time there, and actually, I played the bassoon, so I would go over to the Eastman School for practice.
Wow. Yeah. That's very impressive.
Well,
plus that you played the bassoon.
I don't play anymore, but at that point I did.
And I also want to tell you before you go, like I said, I didn't get to see you when you were doing the interview with Nina, and you were explaining how you decided to let your hair dread. And so I was thinking, I'm looking forward to seeing, like, this is so cute. You look so cute. You look like really youthful. It's just really, really cute. So I like it.
I did not end up doing the dreads, but my hair is, or I started, but I didn't finish. My hair is natural.
It was just a project. It's hard work.
Well, I won't get into hair, so.
Well, all I can say as a white man, guys, it is so much easier to be a man on this planet.
Just please.
So let's give our ladies a little bit more respect.
I'll remind you of that.
Yeah. But especially our ladies of color, we really need to be conscientious of the fact that this is a systemic problem and not just something that's overt. So with that said, we were very grateful that you came on, Jennifer. We will continue to spread the word, and we hope to see you down the road.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.